Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. It means so much to me. Like Scott said, I'm exhausted. So I'm literally running on coffee and Jesus right now. So I've been praying a lot about this night and what exactly I want to share and what God has put on my heart to share. And I really want to share again the story of my calling, about how God called me out of the military to be a missionary. And then I'm going to share about the last couple years and this past season and what God has done in my life, because it's an amazing testimony of God's faithfulness and just how amazing God is, and how even when we're weak, He's strong, and that He will do anything to rescue us and to answer our prayers. So I'll just start at the beginning. So for those of you who don't know me, and people that will be watching this online later, my name is Vanessa, and I'm 29, almost 30. I'm really scared to turn 30 next year, in March. So I'm 29, and I'm a missionary with the organization Youth for Christ. So Youth for Christ is in 130 different countries. And basically the mission of Youth for Christ is to reach every youth everywhere in the world, which is a big mission, but that's what they want to do, what we want to do. So I was in the military because my entire family was military. And I felt like God called me to the military, but also specifically to the Army, because the Army is a place there's a lot of darkness, and I felt like God called me there to be light in the darkness. And I thought that I was going to be in the military for my whole life. But I had the opportunity to travel to El Salvador on a missions trip in 2012. And from the moment I went to El Salvador, I just knew that I was home. And I can't explain it. It was a different country, a different culture. But I just knew, one, I'm home. And two, this is what I was put on this earth to do, to be a missionary. But I was still at Royal Military College in Kingston. So with that, you basically, the military funds your university degree, but then you owe 5 years of service after. So when I first went to El Salvador, I had just finished my second year of university. So I still had another 2 years in my degree and then 5 years of service. So I felt like God gave me my missionary calling, but I also felt like it wasn't the right timing yet. So I had to wait, and I learned a lot of patience and trust. And I was in the military, but every year I would go back to El Salvador on a short-term missions trip. And every year God confirmed and strengthened my calling to be a missionary someday. And then in 2014, I graduated from RMC, and I was posted here to Gagetown. So that's how I started to come to Crosspoint. And Crosspoint became my home. The people were just so amazing. It was the best church I'd ever been to. It's just, I knew that God led me here. And then I started my most intense training course of learning how to be a tank commander, which might seem hard to believe, but it's true. But I was learning how to command 8 tanks at once. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done mentally, multitasking to the extreme. And I tried my best, but I failed by 1 point. And then I got a retest, and I failed by 1 point again. And then I got one more try, and I failed by 1 point. So at that point, I knew that that was not what was meant for me to do. And I had just been in El Salvador a couple months before that, and I got baptized in the ocean there. And I just knew it was so crystal clear that I was meant to be there and be a missionary and not be in the military. But I was still under contract. So I thought I still have to wait. So I thought that God was asking me to change jobs in the military. So I kept waiting just in limbo for 8 months. And I kept encountering all these closed doors and obstacles. And finally I hit this roadblock where I felt like I was at a dead end and there was nowhere else to go. And I didn't know what God wanted from me. And I was just so frustrated and this can't be the amazing plan that God promised me for my future, He promises to give us plans full of hope and a future, and it just didn't seem like that was it. And so then that night, during that day, I was just praying about it, and all of a sudden I had the thought, like, what if God's not just asking me to change jobs in the military? What if he's asking me to leave the military altogether? And what if he's saying, like, that the timing is now for me to leave the military and be a missionary? And at that point, I had only served 1 year of the 5-year contract. So when I prayed that prayer, I just knew. I had so much clarity. But then I thought, I'm crazy. Because I was like, that can't be true. Because if you break your contract, you can, but then you have to pay them back everything. So all your university degree, your training. And I had heard the horror stories, like that it could be like hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I was like, I can't be a missionary and be in that much debt. It's crazy. So then that night, I went to Cross Point for a worship night, and I ran into Pierre, who's here tonight. And the whole night I was just struggling and asking everyone that I encountered, am I crazy? Am I crazy? And every single person said, no, you're not crazy. If God is asking you to do this, then he'll provide. And if you're being obedient to him, he'll take care of you. $100,000 is nothing to him. And then I had the opportunity to pray with Pierre, and he asked me how he could pray for me. And I was like, I'm struggling because I know, like, I'm not questioning my calling. I know that I'm meant to be a missionary, but I'm questioning the timing. Is it now, or am I supposed to finish my contract and wait another 4 years and then leave the military and be a missionary? And I was just struggling with it so much. And then Pierre told me, if God was asking you to wait another 4 years, would he really be putting it this heavy on your heart now? And that was just a moment of such clarity where God used Pierre to speak to me that night and to give me that answer that I knew God was saying now. So that night, I said yes to God. The next day, and I said, God, I'm going to follow you, and I'm going to leave the military, give up my job, everything, but you need to take care of me. And so then I went to the base the next day. So first I found out an estimation of how much I would owe if I broke my contract. And the amount was about $70,000. Then I went to the place where they do all the releases to ask about the process of how I could release and if it was even possible. And the lady told me, so actually, if you do release, you will break your contract, but you'll also receive a pension for the time that you did serve in the military. And the amount of the pension completely covered the debt. So I sacrificed my pension, and if I had waited another 4 years, it would have been $500,000. But I knew that, that was God making a way where there was no way. And it was an amazing testimony of how he provided and took care of me, and he still takes care of me even to this day. So then I put in my release the next day. Had to wait 9 months of torture. Some of you were there for that 9 months. I was in a dark, dark place. But I know now that God used that time for so many purposes, for the people that I met in that month or in that time period. And in Cross Point, that was the main reason why I was here. Because now, to this day, Cross Point is my home. And so many people that I met in that season are like key people in my life now. So when I think about if God had answered my desperate cries to be released earlier, it actually makes me scared because I would have missed out on so much. So then I left the military. I left the military finally in 2016, February. And then I moved to El Salvador in July of 2016. So 5 years ago, more than 5 years ago. And so with El Salvador, I felt so strongly called there. And I also felt like God called me to Youth for Christ because that was how I went on all the mission trips. And the more I learned about Youth for Christ, the more I just learned like what an amazing organization they are and how it fits perfectly with my mentality, my personality, everything, and how the people really, really care about their missionaries and about everyone around the world that they work with and are involved with. But because of the nature of Youth for Christ in El Salvador, I was sent there alone. And I had to pioneer the ministry there because there is no official Youth for Christ El Salvador. So I was basically sent there, and I had to take over that role to essentially start a whole organization in another country alone. And it was one of the hardest things I've ever done because pioneering has so many different aspects to it. There's the one part of it is starting youth programs. And that was something that's my passion. Like, I love just working with youth directly, sharing my music, teaching, just bringing hope and being light in the darkness. But I was trying to start programs from scratch alone, and that was very, very difficult. Another area of responsibility I had was setting up a board of directors, which I have absolutely zero experience with in Canada, let alone in another country, another culture where it's male dominant. I had to do the legal process with the government of how to make it an official NGO, and all the setting up a bank account and all those lawyer fees and everything. And then I also had to try to recruit volunteers and staff and train them so that I wasn't alone, which that also seemed to be impossible. Just given the fact that it's a third world country and people have to work to survive. And so overall, it was just so difficult. And I had this huge responsibility on my shoulders, and I tried so hard. But also, as a missionary, there's always this pressure that you have to show something, like show progress, especially back to your partners in Canada, your prayer team. Everyone wants to see the good that's being done and the progress and how many youth are being saved and how successful the programs are. And so I felt like I always had to put on a positive front, and the pressure just killed me. And I struggled, honestly, the whole 5 years with this role. And through that, I know that God did use me in El Salvador in many ways, but I started to get clarity that pioneering is not my gift or my passion. And I also don't like to be alone, and I don't like to be the leader, something I also learned in the military. I would rather be not the one in charge, but just the one that's like on a team, serving, doing whatever I can to help. And then the pandemic hit. So the pandemic obviously was a really hard time for everyone in the whole world. But I had to make the decision if I was going to stay in El Salvador or come back to Canada because the airport was closing. And I didn't know how bad things would get there. It's a third world country. The medical system is not great. I didn't know when I would get to see my family again or come back to Canada. There were so many unknowns and fear, and I didn't know what would happen. But I prayed about it, and I felt like God wanted me to stay there for the pandemic and that he would use me. And so I stayed. And in El Salvador, we went into a very strict government lockdown. So it's not like a lockdown here. There was actually like police and military checkpoints. People were not allowed to leave their houses, and if they got caught at the checkpoints, they would get thrown in jail. So it was a very strict lockdown. And in El Salvador, it's a third world country, so there's no working from home. Like many people, especially out in the villages, they don't have Wi-Fi. Sometimes they don't have electricity. Sometimes they're just, working in the sugar canes. There's no working from home. And most people don't have savings. And most people just work every day just to put food on their table for their family. So the main problem became starvation. So many people were dying of starvation in many different villages and the communities, and even in the capital. And then we got hit by a tropical storm. So it rained for a full week, which the infrastructure in El Salvador is not used to that. So many houses collapsed, roofs collapsed, there were flooding, and there was like 25,000 families displaced from their homes. So I was there with there were other missionaries that had also stayed from different organizations, and everyone's ministry had to completely shift their focus because we went from dealing with spiritual needs to now physical needs. And honestly, for me, it was a bit of a relief in the sense that I got to put aside the pioneering role and not worry about that. And I just got to focus on how can God use me? How can I help? And many missionaries or someone figured out that we could get special permission from the government to go out to the communities and deliver food supplies and cleaning supplies and pray for people. and help people with their homes, like putting tarps on roofs and things like that. So there was a group of 5 of us, me and my pastor friend, and then 3 other Salvadorians. And the 5 of us were working together. We were basically like a team during the whole pandemic. And my pastor friend, he works for a different organization called Living Water, which is a division of Samaritan's Purse. And so they had a plan that we were going to go out every day and just deliver food and cleaning supplies, pray for people, just try to bring some hope. And so we would drive house to house and give people these supplies. And it was just like so amazing, such a blessing to be able to help in such a real way, like a physical way, and to be out every day with people and know that I was making a difference. And it just gave me even more clarity about what I really want to do, which is direct ministry. Not stuck in my house on my computer learning about how to set up a board of directors. I want to be out every day working directly with people, bringing hope and being light in the darkness. And so, yeah. So that just gave me so much clarity. And it was a really amazing time in that sense. But it was also exhausting. And I'm an introvert. And I was with these 4 other people 24/7 because we were all quarantining together in my house. That was our station to set up all the food baskets and everything. And I did not get any alone time. I was so drained. My batteries needed to be recharged. And then one by one, each of us started getting sick. And so there was the first 4 of us. It was just mild cases of COVID, but it was still like I had all the symptoms. I knew that's what it was. The others were kind of in denial because culturally they just didn't want to call it what it was, even though we had all the symptoms and we're in a global pandemic, so it makes sense that's what it is. But it was just, it was a very hard time. And then my pastor friend was the last one to get sick, and then he ended up in the hospital. And so he found out also that he had diabetes, and we all had very weak immune systems because we were not eating well and just exhausted. And so he almost didn't make it. And I remember that day, like he's one of the most amazing people I've ever met. And he's one of my best friends in the world, and he's been my mentor, my confidant over the years, and just so important to me. But when I hugged him that morning, then when he went to the hospital, I didn't know if I was going to see him again. And it was just devastating. Thankfully, I was able to pass it out to all my prayer team in Canada and just ask everyone to pray for him. And within a few days, he got a plasma transplant, and then he recovered. And then he was released from the hospital in 7 days. So praise God for that. It was amazing, and it was so encouraging to see the power of prayer and just feel so supported, even across the distance. But after that, I was just so burned out, and I was exhausted. My introvert batteries were drained. And then things started opening up in El Salvador. So restrictions started to lift. The airport was going to be opening. And so I thought like, oh, now I have to go back to pioneering. And my heart was just like, no, no. And I just was burned out, and I was feeling a bit lost ministry-wise. But I didn't know what to do. And I was able to come back to Canada last Christmas just for 6 weeks. And it was the first time I was back in 14 months. But 6 weeks is not enough time to rest and recharge when you're burned out. And I got back to El Salvador, and I was just drained. I was feeling lost ministry-wise. I didn't know what God's plan was for me. And it was just a very hard season. I was filled with so much stress and anxiety. And so something else like I really want to share, it's hard for me to share because not many people knew about this. But while this was all happening, I was also in an abusive relationship. And he was one of the 5 that we were all working together during the pandemic. And his siblings lived with me. And he was very emotionally abusive. So he's a narcissist, which means narcissists are very toxic and manipulative, emotionally abusive. It's all about mind games. And with an abusive relationship, it's all about highs and lows. So you have extreme highs, but you also have extreme lows. And just when you think, like, I deserve better and I need to leave, they know exactly how to charm you and manipulate you and get you back in. And it's very, very difficult to leave an abusive relationship. On average, it takes a woman 7 times before she can actually leave for good. So this was all happening pretty much from when I got to El Salvador. He started pursuing me. And I've realized that I have a lot of insecurities in myself. And one of my deepest desires has always been to find true love and get married someday. And I realized that I didn't trust God enough to wait for that and to be patient and trust that God had the best person for me. So I just took it into my own hands and settled. And all this time, I mean, he tore down my self-esteem as a woman, as a Christian, as a missionary. He made me feel very bad about myself and also made me feel like I didn't deserve any better than that. And all this time, like every time I thought, like, you know, someday he has to leave and someday he can't be in my life anymore, I also, at least I had someone. And I was scared that if I said goodbye to him, that maybe I would never find anyone else and I would be alone. And so I held on to that for many years. But he was very controlling and he started to isolate me. So I wasn't allowed to have any other friends. It became that just his family was my only support group in El Salvador. His family became my family. And then our pastor friend was also his best friend too. So that was the only support group I had in El Salvador. And he really became my whole life. And it was it got to the point through the pandemic where he was completely controlling my whole life. Even he was controlling what I ate, like how I dressed. There were certain things I wasn't allowed to do, and it was just, I wasn't free. And in that season, when I got back from Canada, things got really bad, and I started to feel just really trapped. And I didn't know how to get out of it because he had become my whole world in El Salvador. And our lives were so intertwined that I didn't see a way out. And so in those months, I was under so much stress and anxiety. I was so exhausted. My immune system was really weak. And I started to have these fits of emotions. So whether it was anger or jealousy, and he would play on my emotions and try to get a rise out of me and laugh at my tears. And I just started to feel like I couldn't control my emotions anymore, and I thought I was going to explode. And that's not who I am at all. I started to become someone that I didn't even recognize. And I just was in a very dark place, feeling lost ministry-wise and everything. And then in April, I had a very hard month. So there was another man in my church who I had been getting close to in that season. Like our whole group had been invited over to his house for dinner once a week. And he had a wife and daughter, and we would share with them, and they would share their beautiful love story with us. And then all of a sudden, he ended up in the hospital with COVID. And then within a couple days, he passed away. And he was only in his 40s. And it just shook me because I had just been with him like a couple weeks earlier, hugging him in his home. And he was just gone. And I didn't understand why God saved my pastor friend, but not him. It didn't make sense. And his wife and daughter, I felt like God put me there in that season to be there for them and to try to help them through the grieving process. But I didn't know what to say or what to do. Then after that, I got sick because I realized that, again, my immune system was just so weak and I was so broken. And the relationship was starting to affect my physical health as well as my mental health and my spiritual health. And it wasn't COVID. I took a test, but it took me out for a week. And then I lost my grandpa. So I found out that he had passed away, and I wasn't able to go to the funeral. And it was another shock because he had been really healthy, like walking every day and very active. So we didn't know that it was his time yet. So all of that led me to this place where I was just so vulnerable and broken and just sad and suffering a lot. And then on April 20th, I had a meeting with Best Years Fellowship here at Crosspoint over Zoom. And Ruth had asked me to speak, and I had no idea what I was going to say. And I don't even remember what I said. But at the end, Ruth asked me, can you share again your story, your testimony about your calling of military to missionary, the same one that I just shared with you guys at the beginning? And so I shared it, and I realized that I hadn't shared it since before the pandemic because I hadn't been back to Canada. And every time I come back to Canada, I share that story at all the churches and with people that I meet. And every time I share it, it re-inspires me, and it reminds me of my calling as a missionary and what God has done in my life and how he has worked. And when I shared it that morning, I just felt so sad because I realized that I was so far from that. And that's not where I was. I wasn't living up to my calling. I wasn't being light in the darkness. I was just broken and lost and vulnerable, and I felt like I was failing as a missionary. And like missionaries and pastors and even Christians, we always pretend like we have to be perfect. But that's not what being a Christian is about. It's about the fact that we're all human and we all go through struggles and darkness, and we have to choose every day to live in the light because Jesus is the light. And we need to share our struggles because we need to realize that we're not alone and that there are other people going through the same things. And we think that we need to just keep them in darkness, but when we bring them out into the light, they lose their power and the enemy loses his power. So 2 days after that, it was April 22nd, I still remember, and I had a meeting over Zoom with a therapist from Youth for Christ Canada. And he checks on the missionaries like every few months, tries to do like missionary care, see how they're doing. And so I had been talking to him for years. And I had shared about this relationship in the past. He was one of the only ones that knew. And I shared enough for him to know that it was toxic. And he told me a couple years before that, like, this is toxic. This is not healthy. You need to leave. And I was like, I can't. I don't know how. Like, I can't imagine my life without this guy. And he's so important to me. Like, he's the most important person in my life. And he said, it just doesn't make sense because when you were in the military, in that last season, you felt like you were in prison. Like, you felt like you weren't free. And now you're still not free. You're in a different type of prison, but you're choosing to stay there. And there must be something in it that's worth it for you to stay. And I had convinced myself over the years that I was content enough, and at least I had someone. And again, I didn't trust God enough to wait and to be patient and to trust God in his plans. So that Thursday, it was Thursday, April 22nd, I was talking to the therapist again, and I said, yeah, so that guy is still in my life, but I'm not ready to leave. I know it's temporary. I know someday I have to say goodbye to him, but I'm not ready yet. And I had also clung tighter to this guy through the pandemic because he was all I had. And so my purpose that morning for talking to the therapist was asking him for strategies on how to cope with my emotions. Because I was like, I'm having these like anger management fits and fits of jealousy and all this, and I just like, can you just give me tips for how to control my emotions and like calm down and basically I just am trying to survive here. Like that's all I want is just to survive. And the guy looked at me and said, no, I'm not going to tell you how to control your emotions because these emotions are a good thing. And the truth is that the longer you stay in this relationship, the longer it just is going to keep destroying you. You're losing more and more of who you are, and he is becoming your identity. But those emotions show that deep down, you know that you're not in control, and you're angry. And that's the last part of you fighting for you. And it shows that you're not numb yet. And so then I just started crying and I said, I don't know what to do. Like, I feel trapped. Like, this guy is my whole world in El Salvador. Our lives are intertwined. His siblings live with me. Like, I don't know how I can be in El Salvador without him and have him not in my life or not controlling me. And I don't see a way out. Like, I don't know what to do. And then the guy looked at me again and said, yes, your situation is complicated, but I don't believe that it's hopeless. And God can do a miracle in your life. And he cares more about you than your ministry. And the truth is that Jesus will leave the 99 to go rescue the one, and you are the one. And he can do a miracle, and he can rescue you, but you need to be willing to be rescued. And then I said, what if I lose everything? Like, I don't know what would happen. Like, what if I lose everything? And he said, yes, but you know what? When you chose to leave the military and follow Jesus and become a missionary and follow your calling, you gave up everything. And so it's like he's asking you, are you willing to give up everything again to follow me and to follow your calling? And he also said, you deserve so much more than this. So then the next day, it was April 23rd of this year, 2021, I finally prayed that prayer, and I asked God to rescue me. And I never thought I would even have the courage to pray that prayer, and I had been putting it off for years because I was scared that God would answer it. And I was terrified to lose this guy. That was always my biggest fear. So I prayed it, and I asked God to rescue me. And I said, I just want to be free, and I'm willing to give up everything for you. I'm asking you to intervene and to rescue me. I don't know how you're going to do it or when, but I know that you can. And I need you to do a miracle in my life. I want to live a life worthy of my calling. I want to be light in the darkness. And I'm willing to give up everything. So then God started to work right away. And I can't even explain it. Like, it was just the way he moved in the situation, like even within my own heart. I started to be able to stand up to the guy, even in little ways. And I started to challenge him more. And then different things happened to the point where I started to experience some more health problems. And I just knew that was God giving me an out. And I had to take it. So exactly 1 month to the day after I prayed that prayer, I told the guy that we were done. And I told him we were just going to be friends. And I told him that I knew I needed to get out of El Salvador. At that time, I thought I only would leave for like a couple months because I knew we just needed some space. And he didn't accept that. So he continued to pressure me, to pursue me. He tried to stop me from booking my flight. I had to go ahead and just book it without him. And there was a missionary that God actually sent into my life in that season, and she walked this with me. And she was actually there when I booked the flight, and she told me, because he was so charming and manipulative, and I was weak. And I knew that it might work, like all of his manipulation and trying to pressure me not to go, and she was there and she said, no, you're booking your flight now. And so I booked it. And then after that, he just made me feel so bad about leaving, and every single day tried to pressure me into staying. And at that point, he thought I was just leaving for 2 months. And so in that week, I was able to go to the ocean, the same place where I was baptized many years before. And for me, the ocean in El Salvador, it always called to me. Like, it just spoke to my heart. And that's also how I knew about my calling, that I was called to El Salvador. It was just this love that I can't even explain, this connection. And that day when I was sitting at the ocean, the calling was gone. The connection was gone. And I realized that if I truly wanted to be free from this guy, and if I truly wanted to follow God and live up to my calling, I couldn't stay in El Salvador. So God asked me to leave El Salvador for good, and to literally give up everything that I loved for him. And I realized that I loved El Salvador so much, and I loved this guy, but I love God more. And so I knew that God was asking me again to just trust him and give up everything for him, and that he would catch me. So on June 3rd, I got on that plane and I left. I packed 2 suitcases. I left everything else in El Salvador. I was able to open up to my pastor friend and the guy's sister and tell them everything and explain why I couldn't come back. And it was devastating because they had become like my family. So I lost them. I lost that El Salvador family that meant so much to me. And I lost the guy who I realized I really did love. And it wasn't good love, it was toxic love, and it was love that dragged me down and made me believe so many lies about myself and just stopped me from living up to my full potential and my full calling. And he didn't get that. I tried to explain it to him, but he didn't get it. So then I came to Canada and I was in my quarantine, and there was that human part of me that was just naive and thought maybe we can just stay friends from a distance and just keep in touch. But from the moment I came to Canada, he started nonstop just texting me, calling me, pressuring me to come back, making me feel bad about myself, continuing to pursue me, and he was just dragging me down into darkness. And I realized, like, I've given up everything, and I'm not going to let this guy keep me back anymore. So I asked God to help me to shut him out of my life, and God did. So I finally blocked him on everything and cut him out of my life for good. And to this day, he's gone. And so I never thought that I would have the courage to walk away from him, but God gave me that courage. And that's why, I just want to give the glory to God, because he rescued me. He did a miracle in my life, and he set me free. And it's a miracle that I'm standing here right now in person, and I'm free. And I've done so much work since I came back to Canada. I've been going to a Christian counselor, and she has helped me so much to just unpack all the lies that I believed for so long. And I've started to rebuild who I am, rediscover who I am as a child of God, as a woman, as a Christian, as a missionary. And I've regained my strength and my independence. I know now what I deserve. And I know that the love that I was always searching for my whole life, I already have it in God. And so even if I don't find anyone else, I know that I'm going to be okay. And I'm trying to learn that, to just be okay on my own and just trust God with everything. But I know now that I'm so much better off now, even alone, well, not alone, but God has taught me that. And I've had to have a really hard season of just grieving the loss of El Salvador, all my hopes and dreams there, all the people that I lost, and the guy, because, like I said, I really did love him, and I never imagined life without him. But my therapist has helped me to just realize all the manipulation and the ways he used me and lied to me and deceived me and cheated, and just realizing the truth in all of this. And it just is so freeing to just live in the truth and live in the light. And I can just say now that God is so good, and I've been able to let go of El Salvador and forgive and move on. And in all of this, God has walked through this every step of the way, right beside me, and shown me that he is so good. And even in this season of brokenness, when he was all that I had, he was enough. And he is enough. And now I'm at this point where I know I'm crying, but I have done so much progress in my healing and my restoration. God has completely restored all my physical problems back to my full health. So now I can say that I'm healthy again. My immune system is back up. And God has just been redeeming my story, restoring me, giving me a fresh start, healing my heart. And now I'm ready to go back out to the mission field, because I've realized in all of this that my calling is to be a missionary. And my true calling was not to El Salvador. It was not to the army. It's to be light in the darkness, wherever God sends me. And that even includes in Canada, because I've realized that God has given me a platform as a missionary. I have so many opportunities to speak to people and share my story. And I know that God wants me to share my story because he's going to use it. And I really believe that he's going to use it to even someday help other women that are in abusive relationships or that have just left abusive relationships. And I know that like even if God uses my story to impact one woman, then it was all worth it. And so I've been under attack a lot this week, actually, wondering like, should I share my story? Because it is vulnerable and it's real, and like I didn't know if it would be inappropriate for a missionary to share that, or for people to, there was just all these negative thoughts about sharing it, and I questioned like, should I share it? Should I not? But I've realized that all of that was just an attack, and it's because the enemy doesn't want me to share my story. But God does. And not only can I share my story, but I think I need to share my story. And so all of that is to say that now I'm ready for what's next. And I'm actually headed to Costa Rica in January. So I'm going to Bible school for 4 months. And I'm really excited about it because one of my desires is to learn more about the Bible and to improve my Spanish. And so that's going to be such an amazing place to continue my healing and also just a season of growth. And then I've been working with Youth for Christ about my next placement, and they have completely had my back in this. They've just showed me so much support and love. They've recognized that, yes, it was a mistake to send me alone to a foreign country. That was not the best idea, but it's all been a learning process. So basically, but they believe in my calling. And now that I've had the time I needed to heal and be ready, they're going to be sending me to another country with Youth for Christ, but it will be a country where I'll be a really good fit. So it'll be further established in Youth for Christ. So there will already be a team of people, of staff. I won't be alone. I'll get to find a role that's a good fit for me, so I won't be the leader. I'll be part of a team. I'll just get to do what I love and what my gift and my passion is, which is working directly with youth almost every day, sharing my music. And I just know that if I find the right fit, I'm just going to thrive. And I am going to live a life worthy of my calling. And I am going to reach my full potential and make a difference. And that is my heart, and that is my calling. So I do have a heart for Latin America. That's pretty obvious. So basically, Youth for Christ is considering sending me to South America. So El Salvador is in Central America. So this will be a whole new chapter, an adventure, which I'm an adventurer at heart, so it fits perfect. And they're considering sending me to Ecuador or Bolivia. But it could be also another country. It's going to be a place where there's a need and also where I'll be a good fit and where I'll really thrive. And so, if you guys could be praying for me over the next several months while I'm in Costa Rica at Bible school, that would be so amazing. And also just prayer for direction, that God will reveal to me what's next, where he wants me to move next. And again, I don't know how long I'll be called there. It could be just 2 years, or it could be, again, my whole life. You never know. So I've learned to just trust God wherever he sends me. And wherever he has me in that season, that's where I'm meant to be. And life is not about the end destination. Like, where am I supposed to be? What am I supposed to do? Life is a journey, and it's different chapters, and we're supposed to be light wherever God has us in that chapter. And like I mentioned, the light in the darkness that God has given me as my calling, that light is Jesus. And I've learned that I need to be close to Jesus, because then people will see the light in me, which is not me, it's God. So I think that's it. Scott, do you want to come?
So she asked, when we were talking about how we're going to piece this together and how we're going to kind of carry the flow, she said, okay, so after I'm done sharing, if the Lord lays something on your heart, let's maybe just share, and we'll kind of, there's some housekeeping stuff we want to talk about too. But here's the cool thing about this. When we were talking about, prayer teams and support teams and that, she's like, I'm here for rest. I'm here for God to restore and God to heal me. The funds, he's got it. So we're going to talk about that stuff a little bit, but right now, I think this is all right, we'll let God's word talk. I heard a lot of Job with your story. And he took me right to the end of Job in chapter 42. It says, the Lord restored his fortunes. In fact, the Lord gave him twice as much as before. Then all his brothers, sisters, former friends came and feasted with him in his home. They consoled him and they comforted him because of all the trials that the Lord had brought against him. And each of them, I talk about housekeeping and fundraising and things like that, and each of them brought him a gift of money. That's the Bible, y'all. That's the script, I'm just saying. And a gold ring. So the Lord blessed Job in the second half of his life even more than the beginning. Sister, the best is yet to come. My mom always shared, yeah, you hit me in my heart, because my mom was often through abusive relationships. I saw it as a kid. So you kind of plucked at my heartstrings there because it's very real to me. And my mom saw me go through my own not so great relationships. And she prayed me through it. And she spoke, and I can't remember the reference to this scripture, but she spoke this over me saying, what the enemy has intended for evil, God will redeem it. What the locust has taken away, God is going to replenish and restore those fields. And again, for you, the best is yet to come. And I think, I don't know if we're still recording or not, but if we are, and you're online and you're watching this, and something that Vanessa spoke reached out to you or hit you because you're in that situation where you're in an abusive relationship, reach out to someone. We here at Crosspoint, we're here for you. Call the church. Find us on Facebook. Reach out to Vanessa. God has a purpose and a plan for you. You are a beautiful child of God. You are a child of the King. That makes you royalty. And God does not stand for his daughters to be treated in such a way. So hold your head high. Know that your heavenly daddy is pleased with you. And he has amazing and wondrous things for you. Again, thank you for being vulnerable and sharing what was is no more. In Jesus' name, you've been healed. You've been forgiven. The blood has covered you. It is behind you. Walk forward with your head held high, knowing that greater things have yet to come.